He handcuffed my captain's wife right in front of me, right in front of 19 off-duty cops holding beers in my backyard just as the sun was going down over Oakage Estates. Can you picture it? The guy was strutting around in a uniform that looked almost but not quite like the real thing. Plastic badge glinting under the porch light, voice barking orders like he owned the block. "Ma'am, you are being detained for obstruction of duty." Obstruction. He called this circus duty. My captain's wife, 30 years an ER nurse, looked at me and she didn't look scared. She looked like she was asking, "How far are you going to let this go?" My answer then and there, far enough that he'd never try it with anyone else again. Now, before I walk you through how we got there, let me set the stage. I'd been dreaming about this backyard for months. 8 months ago, I signed the papers, moved in, hung up the family photos, and started picturing all the people I'd invite over: friends, co-workers, my police family. That night, it finally happened. 28 guests, burgers, sizzling ribs, soaking up one last layer of sauce, laughter bouncing off the fences like it was meant to be. Captain Hayes and his wife by the cooler, Carolyn Wright mid-story detectives doubled over laughing. This wasn't just a barbecue, it was the 20th anniversary of our unit's community relations. 22 years I'd worn the badge, given everything I had to the job, and tonight was supposed to be a celebration. That was the plan anyway. I just flipped the last row of patties when the doorbell rang, one of those sounds that, if you've spent long enough in uniform, you just know means trouble. I wiped my hands on the apron and went to the door. 2 men on my porch. First thing I clocked was the uniform's dark blue, almost black patches that read Oakage Community Security. The taller one, Nash, stood feet apart, chin tilted up, hands on his belt like he wanted to size me up and let me know he already won. Behind him, a younger guy, Cole, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. Sir Nash barked, "We've received multiple complaints about noise and illegal parking. This gathering needs to disperse immediately." I asked him who he was. He pointed at the badge, a little too shiny, if you ask me. "We enforce HOA regulations here. You're in violation of at least 3 codes. I pressed for specifics. He rattled them off: noise, parking, unauthorized gathering. Then I asked, "Where do you get your authority?" And for the first time, Nash smiled. Not the friendly kind. "The HOA grants us full enforcement powers. If you don't comply, we'll escalate to real law enforcement." Real law enforcement, huh? I didn't laugh, but the words hung between us like a bad punchline. That's about when Carolyn Wright appeared at my shoulder, beer in hand, eyes scanning them top to bottom like she could see right through them. "Which precinct you out of?" she asked, voice all sugar and razor blades. Nash bristled. "We're not Phoenix PD, ma'am. We're community security." Carolyn just nodded, slow and steady. "Interesting, because that uniform looks an awful lot like you want people to think otherwise." Nash didn't bite. He just turned back to me and demanded ID plus a list of everyone on my property. "No," I told him. Calm, polite, but clear. That's when Cole pointed at Captain Hayes' wife, who'd wandered in to see what was going on. "Ma'am, you need to return inside until this situation is resolved." She stopped and looked right at him, then at me. "You're not real cops, are you?" That was the spark. Nash lunged past me, snapped cuffs on her wrist, and announced, "Ma'am, you are being detained for obstruction of duty and failure to comply with lawful orders." You could feel the air go cold. 19 cops and ex-cops all watching a guy in a fake uniform slap cuffs on an ER nurse in my living room. No one said a word, didn't have to. Captain Hayes set down his drink. Carolyn reached into her pocket. Maria Santos by the kitchen quietly turned on her body camera. Nash, still holding Mrs. Hayes' arm, wore that smug look of someone who thinks they've just established dominance. Cole was on his radio calling in additional units for a non-compliant residence. The room was dead quiet. The tension tasted metallic. Then Captain Hayes stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, never needed to. "Son, I'm going to give you exactly one opportunity to remove those handcuffs from my wife." Nash looked at Hayes. 60 years old, Hawaiian shirt, graying hair, but 20 feet of command presence rolling off him. Nash miscalculated. "Sir, this woman has been detained for obstruction. You need to step back or you'll be detained as well." Hayes didn't budge. He pulled out his wallet, flipped it open, gold shield flashing. "Captain Robert Hayes, Phoenix Police Department." Now I'm going to ask you one more time. And suddenly you could see the cracks in Nash's certainty. The badge, the hush in the room, the fact that every eye in that house had shifted from shock to deadly serious. He was standing there in a costume plastic badge fake rig, nothing real except the trouble he was in. Detective O'Brien, nearly 3 decades running down fraud, slipped through the crowd and started eyeballing Nash's gear patches with no state badge, with no authority, pepper spray clipped for show not use. Cole's radio didn't match any actual police frequency. O'Brien raised an eyebrow. Amateurs. Now you might ask why we didn't just take Nash down right there. We had cause, witnesses, video. But you do this job long enough, you learn that the fastest answer isn't always the right one. Arrest Nash tonight, his attorney yells. Overreach. HOA dumps him as a rogue. Nothing changes. I wanted more than Nash. I wanted the machine that built him. So we let him finish the act. Nash finally let Mrs. Hayes go, pretending it was his choice. Consider this a warning, he said. All vehicles must be moved within 30 minutes or they'll be cited and towed. Homeowner will receive fines no less than $5,000. He straightened his badge, stormed out, Cole trailing after. No one argued. Silence was discipline, not surrender. At the door, Nash turned back. This isn't over, sir. The board will be hearing about your lack of cooperation. I watched them drive away, lights on a civilian SUV flashing blue and red, a separate crime in this state. Back inside, Hayes was rubbing his wife's wrist. You let them walk, he said. I nodded. For now. He smiled, saw what I was thinking. How many cameras were running? I counted 4, maybe more, plus whatever the neighbors caught. Hayes grinned. Those 2 just handed us a gift. Now we find out who else has been getting visits. So that's what we did. Sat in my living room, barbecue smoke drifting through the windows, party forgotten. Hayes, Carolyn, O'Brien. Maria cops, but now witnesses too. Hayes said, we have enough to arrest both of them tonight. Impersonation, unlawful restraint, illegal lights. I can have a unit here in 15 minutes. Your house, Douglas, your call. Arresting Nash and Cole tonight would have been clean satisfying. But Nash didn't invent himself. Someone handed him that uniform, wrote the script, told him what to say. Cutting off one head doesn't kill a hydra, O'Brien asked. You ever seen these guys do this before? I remembered something my neighbor Kayla Young told me. She'd signed a warning form at 10 p.m. because men in uniforms told her she had to. Porch light too bright, they said. I'd brushed it off. Now it was all clicking. If there's a pattern, Carolyn said, we document it. One arrest gets us Nash. A pattern gets us the people who authorize this. She was right, but part of me hated waiting. Every day Nash could knock on another door, flash that badge at someone who didn't have a house full of backup. The weight of that sat on my chest. But Mrs. Hayes wanted more than a quick arrest. She wanted the people who built this system to face real consequences. We got to work. O'Brien would pull HOA financials. Carolyn would check licensing. Maria would compile the videos. I'd start knocking on doors. Turns out Nash had been doing this for years. Kayla Young, the Martinez family. Mr. Stewart, each had a folder of forms, each one official looking, each one signed under pressure. The more stories I heard, the clearer it became this wasn't random. New residents, minorities, people who didn't fit, they were the targets. The security company Oakage Protection Services, LLC, was owned by Victoria Ashford's brother-in-law. Residents who sold their homes under pressure sold below market value. 3 houses went straight to an investment group tied to Victoria's husband. It wasn't just intimidation, it was a business model. O'Brien found that Nash's security license had been denied after a failed psych eval. Cole never even applied. They were hired because they had nothing to lose, and someone at the top wanted it that way. 3 days later, Victoria Ashford came to my door. Cream blazer, pearl earrings, Mercedes idling at the curb. Mr. Baker, she smiled. I wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding the other night. She offered a deal. No fines, no more visits. Let's move on. Then Captain Hayes stepped in, cool as ever. How long have Nash and Cole worked here, he asked. She hesitated. Covered tried to bluff, but Hayes pressed. Neither has a valid security license. We have 5 residents documenting similar incidents. I told her about the threats to Mr. Stewart, about the phone calls to encourage sales. Her eyes changed, polite but sharp, the mask slipping. She talked about relationships, about how complicated things get when people talk to the press or file complaints. That's how real intimidation sounds, quiet, reasonable, wrapped in a smile. She came to shut me up. She left knowing she'd done the opposite. 2 weeks later, we pulled the trigger. Hayes coordinated with the prosecutor. I assembled the file, 12 statements, fraudulent citations, body cam footage, audio financials. The arrests happened at dawn, real badges, real cuffs. Nash went quietly. Cole cried and sang, confirmed. Victoria knew everything. There was even a list of residents who needed encouragement, all new arrivals or minorities. The news swept Oakage Estates. People finally started talking. Kayla Young, Patricia Chen, Marcus Webb, their stories all had the same shape, a system designed to make people feel unwelcome until they gave up or disappeared. What started as a barbecue gone sideways had turned into a racketeering case, organized harassment for profit. Victoria Ashford was indicted. The courtroom was packed. Judge Daniels listened to every detail, body cam footage, the list, the money trail. Victoria's lawyer tried to spin it, but it was thin. Judge ruled to proceed to trial on all charges. Victoria's hands trembled as she left. Nash sat hollow, stripped of the last ounce of arrogance. The silence in that courtroom was something I'll never forget. A silence where power finally shifted sides. 6 months later, my backyard was full again. Same grills, same laughter, but everything else had changed. Victoria pled guilty, got 5 years probation, community service, a lifetime ban from any HOA board. She paid restitution to the families she'd hurt. Nash went to prison. Cole testified and moved out of state. Kayla Young won a board seat. The Martinez family joined the committee. Mr. Stewart finally attended meetings. We got a new security company, licensed, accountable. Financial records were public. Neighbors talked to neighbors again. The biggest change wasn't the rules. It was that people believed each other. Mr. Stewart came up to me at the grill, watched the burgers for a moment, then said quietly, "Thank you for believing us. Sometimes that's all people need, to be seen, to be heard, to know they're not alone." So here's what I learned, what I hope you take from this: evil doesn't always kick in your door with sirens blaring. Sometimes it smiles, hands you a form, and tells you it's just following procedure. Sometimes justice isn't loud or fast. Sometimes it's slow, patient, built from the courage of people who finally stand together. Now, I want to hear from you. When is it right to act fast? And when do you have to wait for the bigger victory? Is it better to protect the next victim right away, or dismantle the whole machine, even if it takes longer? Tell me your thoughts below. And if you've ever stood up to power, HOA or otherwise, I want to hear your story. Because in the end, justice only happens when ordinary people decide enough is enough.